Yeah. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. We're on Ayin Vav Beis, about 12 lines up. We have a lot to do today. Tana Rabbanan. It's good that we have a doctor here. He'll be able to give us some insight. So we said yesterday that if Rov Basar is Kayim, second to last word on the line. So if Rov Basar is Kayim, if you have a fracture and most of it is covered by Basar, we said, by flesh, then it's going to heal properly and it's fine. Says Gemara, Tana Rabbanan Nishbaratz and V'yatza L'chutz im or ubasar chofen esrubo mutter im lav asr. So you see here the Brisa adds not only our Mishnah mentioned only flesh, basar. This Mishnah mentions skin as well. The question is skin enough if there's no flesh, or is it just flesh? The Kamaruba. First of all, we have to figure out how much is rov. That means that we said most of the bone has to be covered. What does that mean, rov, most of the bone? Kiyasa Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan rov ovyo, the greater portion of the bone's thickness. For Amri La, rov hekefo, and others say the bone circumference. I don't know exactly what the difference is, but the thickness of the bone versus like going around the entire bone, as opposed to maybe just the thickness like on top of the bone. Amar Rav Papa Hilkach ba'inan rov ovyo va'inan rov hekefo. Therefore, you need both. So first of all, forget about skin versus flesh. Whatever is going to be covering and whatever is going to be healing, it needs to be rov of the fracture, both in terms of the circumference of the bone of the fracture and in terms of the width of the bone of the fracture. So you have to really cover most of the fracture with something. The question is, what's that thing? Amar Ulam Rabbi Yochanan or Harehu Kabasa. So for sure from our Mishnah we see that if most of the fracture is covered with basar, with flesh, it's going to be okay. Ra'ula comes along and says, based on this brisa seemingly, that skin is the equivalent of flesh. That even if there's no flesh left, as long as it's covered by skin, it'll heal as well. Amalei Rav Nachman Le'ula v'leima mar or mitzaref lebasar. But then why don't you say skin can be combined with flesh? The problem is that if you're going to tell me that skin and flesh are equal, but in our Mishnah it didn't say anything about skin, and over there where it says or ubasar, skin and flesh. So what should you assume based on that? The fact that it doesn't say anything about skin in our Mishnah. Maybe flesh by itself is fine, but if you want to have skin, it can't just be skin. It has to be a combination of skin and flesh. Let's say 50-50. Says the Gemara, Amar Le, no, anan or basar taninan. My girsa, the text that I have of the Brisa says skin or flesh. Therefore, our Mishnah only mentioned flesh. This Brisa mentions skin, and therefore it could be 100% skin or 100% flesh. It's good to go. That's one opinion. 100% of each. Ikad Amri Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan or Mitzaref Lebasar. Or you say no. That Ula agrees, the second opinion is that Ula agrees that it can't be just skin. It can be just flesh. Can't be just skin. If it's skin, it needs to be at least 50% flesh. That's what you see from our Mishnah. It needs to be at least 50% flesh. This Brisa adds that if the other 50% is skin, that's okay. Says Gemara, or mashlim lebasar. But if you're saying that our Mishnah only said basar, and that one said basar and skin, maybe it's not 50-50 is okay. Maybe it needs to be mostly flesh, and a little bit of skin is okay. Says Gemara, no, I have a proof that from a case that I saw that it doesn't have to be more than 50% flesh. Ana uvda yadana dahu bar gozat havabei Rabbi Yitzchak. There was a case by a young pigeon that had a fractured leg, and it came to Rabbi Yitzchak. Deor mitzaref lebasar have, and it had 50% flesh covering and a 50% skin covering, and he said it's not a treifa. For asal kamei de Rabbi Yochanan ve'achsharei, he says it's kosher. Therefore, what do you see? You see that skin and flesh can be combined 50-50. Amalei, you can't bring a proof from there. Bar goza ka'amar bar goza derak ichshani. A young pigeon, the skin is very soft. And therefore what? It's like flesh. But an animal's hide, the skin of an animal is very tough. And maybe the skin of, again, we talk about skin, we're talking about a human being, but the skin of an animal is the hide of the animal. That's not the flesh we're talking about. We're talking about flesh in terms of the actual flesh. So the skin which is hard, the hide which is hard, maybe that will not help in the healing process. Therefore, you can't bring any proofs from there. So again, it comes out. One can argue for sure, everybody agrees, 100% flesh covering a fracture is going to be fine. One can argue, according to some, that 100% skin or hide will also be fine. Others argue, no. Since you see in our Mishnah that it leaves out skin, it can't be more than 50-50. If you have, again, you can have 100% flesh, but if you have to have at least 50% flesh, and then the other 50% could be hide/skin. And the other opinion says, no. Most of it has to be flesh, and if there's a little bit of skin, then Lamais it'll be fine. Again, we're assuming the entire time that it's covering most of the fracture. So again, if you want to be Mekil, you could say 100% skin. If you want to be Machmir, you could definitely use a little bit of skin, but not too much.
I would have thought hide would be better than soft skin.
Gemara saying, so again, right. So Gemara saying no. Yeah. Gemara saying that soft skin is more is better for the fracture. Hard hide might not cover it again, because I guess like we discussed yesterday, what's the purpose of it? It's really, I guess, to keep it together and to protect it.
It's protected from infection.
Protect it from infection and stuff, and to help it. But it sounds like it's more like it's to help it grow back together to each other. I guess we'll see a little bit more. Hanu gidim rak and dosu l'kamei d'Rav. Now we have a question. Let's assume it's not covered with skin. It's not covered with hide. Let's say it's not covered with flesh. Let's say it's covered with sinews, soft sinews. Is that enough? Now that would mean that probably there's a little bit less of a covering, right? If you see flesh and you see skin, it's actually covered. Here there's no flesh, there's no skin, it's just sinews. Is that enough? Amar Rava, l'may leichush lehu. Of course it's enough. Why not? Chadad Amar Rabbi Yochanan. I have two proofs. First of all, Rabbi Yochanan said, Gidin shen sofan lahakshos. If you have sinews that are going to harden, nimnin aleim bepesach. We know that if you want to join a korban pesach, we know you have to have a group of people that join the korban pesach. In order to join the korban pesach, there has to be guaranteed that there's going to be a kazayis of meat for you that you can eat from the korban pesach. The question is, do the sinews count as meat? That means the basar is the basar. Do the sinews count? So Rabbi Yochanan holds the sinews count as meat. If the sinews count as meat, then just like they count for korban pesach that you can join the korban pesach, they count for meat that it's going to be there to be able to cover up a wound, a broken bone. And furthermore, haTorah chasa amamon and Yisrael. And furthermore, even if again you would argue that maybe by Pesach, maybe one would argue that Pesach is different. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know if it's just a furthermore like and just like a reiteration or a little bit further. We should realize that the Torah was going to be careful with the Jewish people's money. So if you're telling me that the sinews are not going to cover up the broken bone, then what? The animal might be a treifa if the broken bone is found where? Above the upper joint. Remember yesterday's conversation. That's why we have to learn yesterday's daf for today's daf. We said if it's below the upper joint, then it doesn't ruin the animal anyway. It just ruins that aver. And what's the story of that aver? Is it dangling? Is it not dangling? Does the shechita of the mother accomplish anything or not? The shechita of itself accomplish anything? But again, assuming that it's in the bad spot, assuming that it was hurt in the upper spot, which we said yesterday was the... what spot was that? The yarech, the thigh bone. So assuming that there is a fracture there, which we said will make the entire animal a treifa, but if it's covered with sinews, so we'll say that's enough because we don't want to make the whole animal a treifa. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Papa l'Rav. It's a nice svara, but Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, v'isura deraisa v'ad Amar my leichush lo. I understand. Rabbi Yochanan holds that the sinews count as meat, and therefore you can count them in the korban pesach. But Reish Lakish argues at him and says that the sinews don't count as meat. And you're dealing with an issur deraisa now, because again, you're dealing with a cut, you're dealing with a fracture in the yarech, in the thigh bone. Now the animal's either a treifa or not a treifa. Well, how are you deciding if it's a treifa? Well, everybody agrees that if it's covered by flesh, it's not a treifa. The question is sinews enough? Well, if you're going to be makil here, and sinews is really not enough, you're going to end up eating a treifa, which is an issur deraisa. So in general, you could be makil, but not when it comes to an issur deraisa l'chumra. Therefore, if we're not sure whether sinews should be counted as flesh or not, why are you going like the opinion that says that sinews should be counted like flesh? We should be machmir, since we're dealing with an issur deraisa, and say that sinews should not be counted like flesh, like Reish Lakish. Says Gemara Ishtik, Rava was quiet. Rava had no answer. You're right. Why was he quiet? Why is Rava quiet? Rava elsewhere says that we paskin like Reish Lakish only in 3 cases. And this is not one of them. So if you tell me that there's 2 cases and we don't know who to paskin like, then we say savik deraisa l'chumra. But Rava says Reish Lakish is wrong here. And the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan. And if he holds 100% the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan, that sinews can be counted as part of the korban pesach, and not a savik deraisa l'chumra, you hold 100% sinews are meat. If sinews are meat, then there's no savik deraisa l'chumra here. Then it's fine. Says the Gemara, no. Shani acha dehada be Rabbi Yochanan legabe de Reish Lakish de'amar lei al takniteni b'lshon yachad ani shono. So no. The fact that Rava says that we only pass like Reish Lakish in other cases, he doesn't include this case, which seems to say that he passes like Rabbi Yochanan. No, Rabbi Yochanan himself is choser to Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan agrees after the fact that really you can't be counted in the korban pesach because sinews are not flesh. Therefore, if he himself went back, Rava doesn't have to say we paskin like Reish Lakish in this case too, because it's obvious we paskin like Reish Lakish. Nobody argues on him. So it comes out again that Reish Lakish is right. Rabbi Yochanan agrees to Reish Lakish. Sinews are not considered to be flesh. Sinews are not considered to be flesh. Ein achanami, if there's only sinews covering the broken bone, then we will paskin like everyone, and therefore it will be a treifa.
So when he's saying that we only paskin like Reish Lakish
in 3 cases,
and And although he's agreeing with Reish Lakish, it's because
we only pass like Reish Lakish in 3 cases where he argues on Rabbi Yochanan. But in cases where everybody agrees, then we're not going to pass against it just because Reish Lakish says something. We don't hold that against him.
Right.
But in that case where he agrees with Rabbi Yochanan, then there's nothing to talk about. Nobody argues.
Right.
We pass like Reish Lakish versus somebody else. We pass like Reish Lakish when he agrees with other people. We can pass like him a million times. Says the Gemara, "Hu nishbar etzem v'yatza l'chus." Now let's say you have a case where there's a broken bone, it's fractured, and it broke through the skin, but the greater portion is covered by flesh, by skin, whatever it needs to be covered by. But the ishtakil kortita minei, a chip of the bone came off. So now a chip became detached. So now most of the fractured bone is covered, but a piece of the bone is missing. Is that going to stop the healing process from happening? Because if it will, then even if most of it is covered, it's going to be a problem. Also, he waited for 3 regalim. He didn't know the answer. Now, what happened to the animal while he was waiting? Either the animal was still alive and they were just taking care of him. Because again, a treifa doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to drop dead. It means that most animals are going to die from this, but it doesn't necessarily mean. So we either waited 3 regalim, or he had already killed the animal was dead, it was shachted, and we just have this meat that's not refrigerated, because there's no refrigerator, but it was curated, and it was waiting to be eaten. It was like beef jerky. It was waiting to be eaten, but he can't eat it until he finds out whether that animal, which had the fracture, again, seemingly in the upper part, was a treifa or not. Says Gemara, so nobody who came to the Aliyah L'Regel was able to answer the question. He said, go to Rava, the Charifa Sakine, he's sharp as a knife. He's very smart. Our Brisa, our Mishnah clearly says, the Brisa says, the bone was fractured and he broke through the skin, and it says nothing about anything else happening. It says if it's covered by skin and or flesh and or skin, it's kosher, it's fine. It doesn't say anything about, and if a piece of the bone detached. If it doesn't mention anything, don't look for problems. It says Gemara, Mali Nafel, Mali Isei. If it doesn't mention anything about the bone detaching, or the bone being, or a piece of the bone falling off, even if a piece of the bone falls off, as long as it's covered by flesh or skin, it will heal and it's going to be okay. Amle Ravino L'Rava. Miskali Ma. Now we're going to ask a bunch of questions and we're not going to know the answer. Again, we said if it's covered by flesh, most of it's covered by flesh, the broken bone, 77A2. Most of it is covered by flesh, it's going to be okay. Now we're going to have some weird cases, or cases that are not, I guess, regular cases. Mitlaket mahu. What happens if it's covered, most of it is covered by flesh, but it's not, as he says, contiguous? That means you thought that when we say most of it's covered by flesh, you have the broken bone here, and it's covered by flesh like this, most of it, and a little bit is not. But let's say most of it is covered by flesh, but it's like a little piece here, a little piece here, so they're like holes. We'll see there's another case. So it is covered by flesh, but it's not, a whole area is not covered together. So maybe it's not going to heal if there's just a lot of different pieces. So most of it, it's like by Erevin, like we spoke about, Omeid Meruba Laparetz. There's more closed area than open area, but it's scattered. So maybe there, at the end of the day, it's not going to heal properly. The Gemara doesn't say, I don't know. Misrose Ismail, what happens if the flesh that's covering it is actually very flat and weak and thin? Maybe that's not going to heal properly either. Mismas meismau, if the flesh decayed, what does that mean? Hechidam mismas, so it's a case of decaying. Amrafuna, Breda Rav Yeshua, Kol Sharofe Kojo. Anything that a veterinarian will peel off is considered to be decayed. Maybe decayed flesh will not be, again, we're looking for enough of a protection so that the bone underneath it will actually heal. Ibayilahu, Nik of Mao, what happens if the flesh is punctured? That seems to be similar to the case where, again, it's not added together, where it's in like different sections. Niklaf ma'u, if the flesh is peeled away from the bone. It was somehow like peeled away and then put back on top of the bone. So it's not like in its natural state. Nizdak ma'u, it's on top of the bone, but it's split. Nital shlisha tachta ma'u, or if the bottom third of the flesh was removed and only the top 2/3 remain. That's the equivalent of like being peeled off and putting back. Tashma damar ulam Rabbi Yochanan, or hareyu kibasar. Well, he says skin is the equivalent of flesh. If skin's good enough, assuming, again, we said that maybe at max 50% skin or a little bit of skin, but we said that the push-up shot is that skin 100% would be fine. If skin is good enough, then seemingly flesh that was peeled away and then put back on is good enough as well. Flesh that was pulled away and put back on should be no less of a protection than skin. Dioma dekana mashkachidei. But maybe no. Maybe we should be machmir because maybe skin is only good when skin takes hold of the bone. But maybe flesh that was peeled away and then just sort of like laid back on top of the bone is not going to be good enough. What happens if the flesh is covered but there's like a little ring around the area of the flesh that's carved away? This is more like advice. He asked scholars and veterinarians, how do you make skin regenerate? If you scratch flesh with the bone from another animal, interesting. If you scratch flesh or you scratch bone, I would say, you scratch flesh with a bone from another animal, it'll cause the flesh to bleed, it'll cause the flesh to rejuvenate, and then to grow connective tissue, and then it'll grow over the bone. So you can't actually make the bone grow again, but you can make the flesh grow more. So again, in these cases where there's a little bit of a cover, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll solve it, but in the cases where you have a little bit of a hole and you're not sure what the answer is, you can sort of, again, if most of it's not covered, then it's a treifa. It's not going to go. But again, I don't know, maybe after the fact, if you're able to regenerate the skin, or you're able to regenerate the flesh, maybe it'll cover it and it'll be able to heal. Aval parzala mizrav zarf. And you just know, and again, they say that doctors use this now, but if you scratch flesh with metal, not with bone, then it will not regenerate. Amar papa v'hu dekana garma didei. And this is only when the bone takes hold of the flesh. That means you have to have the flesh on top of the bone. Then if you scratch the flesh with another bone from another animal, or from this animal but you don't have any bones, and the bone from another animal, it'll regenerate, it'll continue to cover the fractured bone, and it will actually make it heal. Pretty cool, no?
Is Reb Papa and Reb Papi the same people?
No. Reb Papa is somebody else. Says the Gemara. No, it's two different people.
No, it's just here.
Who would you rather have? Which one would you rather have your name? Of Papi or of Papa? You're Papi. Are you Papi? My grandfather was Papi. Azedi. Papi's it's a Polish name.
It's from South America?
No. Oh, Papi also, but my grandfather was from Poland. Okay, Zak the Mishnah. Just in time, Mendel. Hashochet esavema u'matzah bashilya. Now we're going to have a few interesting cases. So we spoke about that if you shacht a mother and there's a fetus inside, so you could eat the fetus, we said. Forget about sticking out arms, not sticking out arms, that's okay, that's complicated. But now, a regular case of a ben pakua. If you go ahead, Rabbi Diana asked me to mention, he's giving, he was inspired by DAF YOMI, so he's doing contemporary halacha on Sunday in Orach Chaim. He's giving the case of ben pakua, what the story is contemporary halacha. Okay, if you want to listen or you want to go. So we said that if there's a fetus inside and you shach the mother, you can eat the fetus without shchita. Let's say you shach the mother and there's no fetus inside, but there's the shilya, the amniotic sac.
Oh, the amniotic sac.
Amniotic sac. So what's the story? Well, first of all, why would you want to eat that? Says the Gemara, nefesh hayafet tochlan. If you're the type of person who's favorably disposed to eating such things, you're allowed to eat it. Why? Because again, if other people find it revolting, it doesn't matter. It's not Aver min achai. It was in the mother at the time that you shachted the mother. Therefore, even though seemingly there's no fetus in there now again, it could be that the amniotic sac had the fetus and then it broke away from the fetus. It's still in the mother. You could eat the amniotic sac. As we'll see, it could also be that you're going to open up and you're not going to see a fetus at all. That where it get a little bit complicated, because if there's no fetus, then where'd the fetus go? If the fetus came out, if the amniotic sac came out, went back in, again, we'll have to see. But right now, the case, regular case, we don't know where the fetus is. We just see an amniotic sac, and seemingly there is a fetus in there. You see the sac, you're allowed to eat it. Usually it comes out. When a woman gives birth, it comes out. But let's say it doesn't come out. The shilya doesn't come out. You want to eat it. You can eat it. Because again, it doesn't have to be shechted. Okay, there's probably a lot of blood. Again, like we said elsewhere, you have to drain the blood, but fine. Ve'ena metama. But it doesn't contract tumah. It's not makabel tumah, because in order to be makabel tumah, what do you have to be? You have to be food. In order, you have to be a vessel or food. So even though some people eat it, most people don't eat it. Therefore, if you have it and it touches something tummy, it's not going to be makabel tumah. Now, if the guy who's eating it has it in his book, it's food. Therefore, it is makabel tumah, as we'll see. But if a regular person takes the shilya, the amniotic sac, we'll call it a shilya because it's easier to pronounce. If he takes the shilya, it's not going to be makabel tumah. And lo tumas ochlin, not the tumah of ochlin. I mean, it's not going to be makabel tumah because it's not food, because most people don't eat it. But lo tumas nevelos. It also doesn't have the tumah of nevela. Why? Because even if you open up the mother and the mother dies without shchita, we still don't consider it to be part of the flesh. And this is important because we're going to see, we always assume an animal drops dead, it's nevela. Not every part of the animal is nevela. The bus or anything edible is nevela. And this is very important. The basar, the flesh, the hide is not nevela. The hide of an animal that drops dead is not nevela. It's not makabel tumah. You can't eat it. Therefore, we're saying the amniotic sac is not edible either. If you have a regular amniotic sac from a nevela, it's not makabel tumah. Again, that's something that we don't necessarily think about. We just assume an animal drops dead, the entire thing is tameh. Now again, if you touch it to get out the hide, seemingly the person who touches it is going to be tameh. The question is, what's the story of that actual hide? It's not edible, so therefore seemingly it's not tameh nevela. It'll seemingly be makabel tumah, right? It's not going to be a tameh nevela. It'll be makabel tumah by touching the basar. If the basar got wet, maybe. But again, you have a regular animal that drops dead.
Yeah,
you skin
if you
it.
walk over and just touch it.
You go over and touch it
Do
again.
you become tummy from?
So it sounds like because the hide is touching the basar, maybe you would become tummy. But again, the hide itself, if you would separate the hide, I think that's the point. Again, I thought about it a little bit. If you would separate the hide and then sell it as a leather purse
It's not.
in the store, you will not become tummy every time you touch a leather purse. That's how I understood it. But if you go over and touch a dead animal, you're touching the animal, you're touching the basar, you're touching everything together, seemingly you'll become tummy. That's how I understood it. I could be wrong. That's how I understood it.
Otherwise, because there's always these asurim about touching dead animals.
Right.
It
So
must
that's how I understood it. Is that it doesn't become tumas nevela. But again, over here we're talking about the shilya. We're not talking about the hide yet. Now we're just talking about the shilya.
Right.
The shilya comes out of the animal. That's not going to be, because again, it wasn't makabel tuma. If you touch the hide of a dead animal that's connected to the animal still, you might have a problem with touching an actual dead animal, touching the basar part or being around. But again, assuming the hide was separated, like the shilya that's separated, the person who takes it out might become tameh, but the actual shilya itself is not makabel tuma. The hide itself is not makabel tuma because it's not edible. But again, if you're a guy who wants to eat the shilya, now all of a sudden mitama tumas ochlin v'alo mitumas nevelos. So then again, the shilya is never makabel tuma nevelos, but if you're the type who wants to eat it, now it'll be makabel tuma because now for you it's edible and it'll be makabel tuma. So that's one case. A regular case where you find a shilya, if you want to eat it, you could eat it. But again, in general, a shilya is not edible, therefore it's not makabel tuma, and it's definitely not a nevela if you open up.
Is the placenta inside the amniotic sac?
No,
That's what feeds the baby, right? It's attached to the womb.
No, yeah, I'm trying to think of my anatomy.
Placenta separate, no?
Placenta. Yeah, I think.
Isn't the sac just what's around the baby?
Yeah.
So the baby's feeding, its umbilical cord is attached to the placenta. That's what it feeds.
I think that's what I thought. And it's inside of a little sac. What comes out of the baby after it's born, though? Does the amniotic sac come out or just the placenta?
Well, the amniotic sac
Dissolves?
It's a membrane, and you just don't see it.
It dissolves, sort of.
dissolves.
Okay, interesting.
But the placenta comes out with the baby, right? That blood.
Well, it comes out afterwards, hopefully. If not, they have to remove it.
That's right.
That's the whole thing of blood that comes out after the baby is
Right,
delivered. But if it
right.
doesn't come out, then you have to remove it.
Right.
It's dangerous
I
otherwise.
remember that.
Put your hand in.
I'm a rabbi, but I could actually be a doctor in my spare time. Shilya shiyatza mixasa. Now we have an interesting case. Now that we know that again, the shilya that's inside the baby, which is totally in the baby when you shech the mother, you can eat the shilya if that's your cup of tea because lemaisa it was shechted with the mother. But shilya shiyatza mixasa. Let's say now it came out a little bit before the animal was slaughtered, and then it went back in, or it just stayed out a little bit, like a limb that's sticking out. Now asura ba'achila. You can't eat it. Why? Siman vlad be'isha v'siman vlad be'mema. Because what's inside of the shilya? Usually, a vlad, a fetus. If it sticks out and then it comes back in, even if you don't find a baby in it now, what might have been in there? A baby. What might have come out of the baby? The head. Therefore, it's possible that the entire vlad and the sac became usher because at the end of the day, once it sticks its head out, it's as if it's born, and lemaisa it's no longer allowed with the mother shchita. That's the next chiddush in the Mishnah. Okay? And what do we assume? We assume now, as we'll see, maybe the head is gone, maybe it dissolved, but at the end of the day, maybe it came out, and therefore it ushered the entire shilya. Because anytime, there's a famous idea, anytime you have a fetus, right, anytime you have a shilya, there must have been a fetus as well. There's no such thing as a shilya without a fetus. You don't just have amniotic sacs walking around people's stomachs. Again, you may not see the fetus anymore, it may have miscarried, it may be gone, but you have to assume that there was a fetus. Next, these are a lot of interesting cases. Mechaberes sheipila shilya. Now, let's say you have an animal, and it never had a baby before. And now it miscarries a shilya, an amniotic sac. And again, we don't know the gender. Now, if it miscarries a boy, we said that in terms of bechor, it's considered to be peta rechem. And if you remember, we had the conversation that in terms of inheritance, the next one is still a bechor. But in terms of the opening of the womb, the first one that comes out, even if it's a stillborn, even if it's not viable, that first one that comes out is going to be considered to be the bechor. Fine. And therefore we said that even if it comes out and it's not viable, you have to treat the animal that's a male with proper respect. But let's say just the shilya comes out. Now if the shilya comes out, we assume that the fetus, what happened to the fetus? We assume that the fetus dissolved in the shilya. It was a miscarriage, it dissolved. And by looking at the shilya, you have no idea if it's a man or a woman. If it's a man, then the shilya which has the remains of the Bechor in it, would need to be buried, would need to be treated with respect. If it was a girl, then there's no Kedushas Bechor, and then you can do whatever you want with the sack. Says the Gemara, Yashlichena leklavim. You can throw it to the dogs. Why can you throw it to the dogs? So the Gemara is going to explain that what's the chances that it was a boy and what's the chances that it's a girl? 50-50. So you should say we have to be machmir because it might be 50-50 boy. So therefore you should have to assume maybe the shilya had a boy in it. Therefore when it comes out, you should have to bury it because maybe it's a bechor. Says the Gemara, even within the tzah that it was a boy, there are certain cases, even when a boy comes out, that it's not going to be a kedushas bechor. If a baby comes out deformed, talking about a regular animal. If an animal comes out deformed, if a cow's animal comes out looking like a camel, let's say, that small percentage, which is very unlikely, 1%, that small percentage does not have Kedushas Bechor. So now you have 50-50, boy or girl, but within the 50 boy, 1% wouldn't be a Bechor anyway. So it comes out that 51% of babies that are born to mothers are not Bechorim. Therefore, when you have the sack that comes out and you're not sure if it's a boy or girl, you could assume that it was a girl. It doesn't have Kedushas Bechor, and you can throw the sack to the thing. Again, if a miscarried male comes out that's deformed, whatever, so then it doesn't have Kedushas Bechor. But if a miscarried regular male comes out, it has Kedushas Bechor. You know it's a male. You have to bury it. That's what we said. But over here, you don't know if it had a boy or a girl in it. Therefore, you can assume it was a girl. Uvemukdashin. But if the animal was consecrated, the mother, and then it has a baby, it has an amniotic sac, it has a shilya, and you don't know, it's all dissolved, you don't know if it's a boy or girl, that has to be buried. Why? Tikaver. Why? Because at the end of the day, when it comes out, whether it's a male or female, if the mother was consecrated, the baby is also consecrated. Unless this very 1% case where it doesn't have the form of an animal, then it's not consecrated either. But 98% of cases are going to be consecrated. Therefore, if the mother was consecrated and it comes out with a shilya, and you can't tell what the fetus was, it doesn't matter because either way, whatever the fetus was that's now dissolved is consecrated and therefore has to be buried.
Even if you knew it was a girl.
Doesn't matter because consecrated works for the girl also,
right.
Even if you know it was a girl. Right. It's only by Bechor that it has no Kedusha if it would have been a girl. Therefore, you can assume like the 51% and you can throw it to the dogs. Vein koven osab beparshas drachim. You can't bury, whenever you have to bury a shilya or a fetus or whatever, you can't bury it at a fork in the road. Vein tolan osab ilan. You can't hang it on a tree. We know that the Amorites used to do some things as superstitious beliefs. So they would actually, when they had a miscarriage, they would hang the baby or the shilya on a tree, or they would put it on a fork in the road. It would be like a superstitious positive thing so that they wouldn't have any more miscarriages. So we can't do that because that's following their ways. We're going to see in the Gemara that we're allowed to follow the practices of the Amoris if there's something tangible to it. Just because they use Advil doesn't mean I can't use Advil, even if they attribute it to their gods. But something that's just superstitious without actually doing an act of refuah, that's going to be a problem. So hanging a baby on a tree or hanging a shilya, a sack on a tree, that has no purpose to it, quote unquote. That's just superstitious. But if it was actually something real about something, like taking medicine or the like, even though they do it, it's not going to be us. This is halacha l'maisa. Certain things that they do, we can't do. But again, just because they wear clothing, if we say, v'choseim lo selechu. So if we say that Beged Isha, or we say that they wear certain types of clothing that are specifically for Avodah Zarah, it's different than saying, well, I can't wear a short sleeve shirt because the Amoris also wear short sleeve shirts. No. But if there's something specific that they wear, short sleeve shirts with a red thing over here, or if you start walking around with a little dot over here for whatever, if that's something that's superstitious, so then that would be aser.
So there's a fork in the road, take it, right?
If there's a fork in the road, just don't bury anybody there. Says the Gemara. So we want to have a rule now about the shilya. Minani mili. What's minani mili? How do you know that if you slaughter the mother and there's a regular shilya in there, again, if it's still in the mother, we don't care whether there was a fetus in there or not, even if the fetus dissolved, the sac never came out, therefore it was included in the shechita of the mother, just like the fetus would have been. So how do you know you could eat the shilya if you open up the mother? Minani mili, the Tanur is again, assuming the shilya never came out. Kol behema tochelu. So if you remember, it says kol behema my first parts, a bib behema osat tochelu. A behema in a behema, you can eat. That includes the shilya as well. Yachal afilu yatsa miksa. So you might think that if the sack goes out and then it comes back in, you can still eat it, or if part of it is out, you can eat it. Talmud lomar osa velo shliya. So we said, what's the problem? If part of the sack comes out, you have to be choshesh that the head of the fetus which is now dissolved came out as well. If the head came out, it was if it was born. Therefore, when you shech the mother, just like any baby who stuck out his head, if you then shech the mother, it's not included in the shechita of the mother. You have to be choshesh for here as well. See, when we start doing more and more Gemara, you start to at least apply some of the rules. Michte ain't shilya below vlad, but I understand. Lama li kro. What do I need a pasuk to tell me that if the sack sticks out a little bit, then I shech the mother, you can't eat the sack? It's obvious. I know that there's no such thing as a sack without a vlad, and I know already that a vlad that comes out is going to be a problem. Therefore, why would I think that you can eat a sack if the sack came out? Says Gemara cross machta. You're right. It's just an asmachta. Asmachta means we don't learn it from here. We already know it from elsewhere. But we have another further support from this kra. It happens to be that this kra, if you remember, the kra is the pasuk. It happens to be that this pasuk, if you remember from Samach Tes Amud Aleph, which I didn't remember, I just saw, but Samach Tes Amud Aleph, it says that this pasuk actually teaches us that if you cut off a piece of the animal itself and leave it inside, you cannot eat it after you shech the animal. We said if you cut off the klayos, the kidneys, or the spleen, even though if you cut off a piece of the fetus, you can then eat it after you shech the mother. If you cut off a piece of the animal itself, we said we had the whole thing with gufa versus the uber. If you cut off a piece of the animal, then even though it's not going to ruin the whole animal, you can't eat that piece after you shech the animal. Ve'eno metama. So we said again that the shilya itself, even though some people eat it, it's not metame. It doesn't contract tuma. And it's not nevela. If the hide of a donkey was cooked, what's the law? So I found this to be a little bit confusing because what would you think? If a donkey drops dead, what is that? If a kosher animal drops dead, what is that? Fine. You take a kosher animal, we said you skin it, right? You skin it. Let's say you become tameh, but let's say the person who skins it, if you now touch the hide of a kosher animal, what did we say? It's not edible, therefore it's not makabel tuma.
Right.
Would the same thing apply to the hide of a donkey?
Non-kosher animal.
It's a non-kosher animal. It's not makabel tumah. It's the same thing. Can you eat the hide of a donkey?
No.
I'm not sure. So I would think not, but it's not clear from here because the Gemara is talking about now. Boy, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Now, he wants to know or chomer sheshlaku mahu. If the hide of a donkey was cooked, the hide of a donkey is very hard. Let's say you cook it now.